everybody! Today I'm here to discuss episode 12 of Neverafter from Dimension 20, and I really feel like you get what you put out into the universe, right? Sometimes, because this episode had every single thing I wanted, and I had talked about how in the previous episode they kind of had some decisions to make about where they wanted to go, if they wanted to go to Snowhold or Toy Island, and my vote was for Toy Island, but they, for sensible reasons of course, decided to go to Snowhold, and that meant that we would be meeting Snow White, which is really cool, but at Toy Island we would be meeting the Little Mermaid, who I have really been wanting to meet for a while. I've just been wanting to meet any princess for a long time. It's been so long since we met Cinderella. We haven't met Elodie at all yet, so I was really like, I need some princesses in my life. And not only did this episode do the kindest thing in introducing me to Snow White, but at the end, we also got the Little Mermaid. I was so flippin' excited because I was going into this being like, oh, I'm so excited that like we're finally gonna see one princess, and Snow White's really cool because she's like this like necromancer, goth queen kind of thing, queen of the undead. Then we get Mira too. We get to meet her, which first of all, I love her name. I loved both of their character designs, looked so cool. And Mira, I had said before, I thought could have the most interesting version of herself from Brennan, because again, there was a lot that I forgot about like the original Little Mermaid tale. I knew she turned into Seafoam at the end, but I forgot that like her walking is like so excruciating. Like it's like getting stabbed with like a bunch of needles and knives when she walks, and she's just in constant pain. Forgot about that. So yeah, we'll get to Mira after, but I want to dive deep into Snow White because I don't want to do her a disservice and ignore her just because we met Mira, because they're both equally amazing in their own right, and Snow White gave our party so much information. I love her. I love her. I'm sorry. So yeah, I think Snow White so far is probably my favorite princess. I know that's kind of crazy to say because I loved Cinderella so much, and like Elodie seems so badass, and Rosamund obviously love, but I think it's the Wednesday Addams-ness of her, right? Like just like this goth queen of the undead. She raises an army of dwarves, and she's just so cool. Like she's just so amazing, and the kind of person that you want to go to and be like, hey, I trust you, like this is what we know, and can kind of help you out with that. And I really, really loved her, and I loved the interpretation Brennan put on her. And one thing that has stuck with me throughout the whole episode, right when he said it, it stuck with me, and then I've still been thinking about it since then, and I think it's something I will carry for a while because it's so important, is he kind of in Snow White flipped the script of being like, you know, I went through hard things, and because of who I am, it was worth it, or something like that, you know, of being like somehow grateful for your suffering, I think, in a way, which is a really messed up thing, and goes back to that idea of like with the princesses, they go through suffering, and that's kind of why the audience or the authors care about them, is it's like your reward for suffering is good things, but it's like, why can't you just be rewarded with good things without having to lose something in the process? So I really liked that Snow White's interpretation of this wasn't that, you know, I'm grateful for what happened or that it had to happen. Her interpretation was, she literally said, you know, she lost the dwarf. She lost so many people. She woke up in a glass coffin and had to punch her way out. But she was like, I've lost so many people. And given the choice, would I want all this to happen? Absolutely not. But she says, it's not going to be for nothing. And I like that. I like that it's not like acknowledging your suffering as like a part of your journey and like something that had to happen so you could become stronger. Like obviously she wouldn't want her friends to die and for her to be alone and for her to have all this information and, you know, be fighting this seemingly unwinnable war. She wouldn't want that. But she's going to acknowledge what happened and be like, that happened to me, and that's not going to be for nothing. And I really like that, of like taking your sacrifice and being like, it was messed up and I wish it hadn't happened, but I'm not going back. Like that's not all going to be for nothing. So I really, really like just her kind of resolve that she had. I think she's so cool. I mean, the fact that there's like this big battle coming up against the Snow Queen's army or the king or whatever, and she's not even that worried because they have like I can't say his name because I hadn't heard of him. I know Emily had heard of him, but I hadn't heard of him. But essentially they have that like unkillable knights. They have like his death. So like she's like, we got this. You guys can go to Toy Island. When she told them they could go to Toy Island, I was so flippin' happy. You don't understand. I know Gerard was not happy at all. The poor, poor man. And like, especially after like, oh my gosh, just when The whole scene of like, don't get mad, promise you won't get mad. It was like, they talked about an invention party, but so like a child, you know, of like, hey, I'm gonna tell you something, but you have to promise not to get mad, right? Like, that's totally how you would do it with like your mom or your parent or something. And then I also liked that someone pointed out, it was in a good reference to Evan Kelp had a saying about it. I can't remember what the exact thing was, but like, it's a crazy thing to ask someone to control their emotions to something that they don't even know yet, you know? So that was funny. Yeah, finding out that like Snow White was not aware that Elodie was married. Yeah, probably the worst thing you could respond, right? Is she's married when finding out she has a husband. Like, Gerard just truly had a horrible, no good day. I saw someone did a compilation of like him like finding out that Ellie hasn't told him she's married, which someone pointed out, and this could be optimistically, but someone pointed out in Tumblr maybe it's because she thinks Gerard is dead, and like out of grief she like doesn't want to talk about her husband, but I just feel like it's not a good sign. And then he got clubbed on the head by Candlewick and tried to be eaten, and then just everything that happened at Twilight Island, like emotionally and physically, it was a day for Gerard. But one of the great things about Elodie though is that we found out she is part of this princess pact, if you could call it that. So I was always kind of unsure. I think just because like she wasn't like a known princess to me. Like obviously like I mean it's the Disneyfication of it, but I just think of the Disney princesses when I think of like princesses. So like Elodie, even though she is a princess and like is obviously in Disney as Tiana, I think because she had a different name, like it just to me I was like, oh, maybe she's not really a princess. But yes, we found out that the world which Snow White has seen they have the best chance of winning is when they have 7 princesses. So they've got Rosamund, Snow White, Cinderella's on her way with Elodie, and then the Beast, who we also haven't met yet, but I'm super excited to see that interpretation. Like, is it the Beast or is it like some kind of like version of Belle and the Beast like combined together or something like that? And then we met Snow White, and then Mira we also got to meet at the end. So that is our 7 princesses that are gonna take hopefully this final stand against, I still don't know if it's like the fairies they have to fight, but then the stepmother's also out. They were talking about on Adventure Party about how it's kind of like a scale of like free will to predetermined like destiny, and like, you know, stepmother and the princesses are more aligned to free will, but like stepmother is more of a like, I'm gonna burn it all down, you know, kind of thing. Like, oh, you think I'm bad? Like, I'll show you bad thing. Whereas the fairies really want this kind of predetermined thing because they get their magic from the authors and they don't want to piss the authors off. Then the princesses didn't even know about the authors, which was interesting. Like the princesses knew about Neverafter, like multiverses, but they didn't know about the lines between and all that. So it was very interesting that our party could kind of help out Snow White and kind of start to get that together, because I do think that's been one thing, not in a bad way, but just like I feel like the big bad of like I can't picture like the final confrontation, final episode, what that's gonna look like. And again, that's not bad at all. I think that's kind of actually interesting, but it just makes it so the more information they get and the more information they give to certain people who they feel they can trust makes you more invested in kind of figuring out, okay, like what direction is this going in? Like next episode, obviously they're going to be fighting the Mer King, which I'm very worried about because the Mer King seems a lot. Like, you know, I feel like they've done a good job fighting like the Baron of Bricks and then Miss Muffet, but I also feel like that was kind of a little bit like more even on their side, if that makes sense. Like they had a definitely the element of surprise, which they don't have in this case, and it just has me a little worried. I think the only good thing is I don't think he wants to kill his daughter. I think he wants to bring her back, so I feel like that could be kind of a thing of like, you know, it's always kind of harder in a battle sometimes if you're like not willing to like fully take a person out, if like you want to bring them back with you, because then your strategy kind of has to change. So I don't know, I'm sure he won't hesitate to kill any of them, and I'm very worried about that. But my jaw, I think that was the most like shocking moment of the whole season, and probably in Dimension 20 that I can remember for a while, when like the Little Mermaid was just casually like telling them in her head like, oh yeah, there's a curse where like if I touch the water, like my dad will know instantly. And they're like, oh, if you touch the water, and she's like, well, if any princess touches the water, and everyone's just like, oh shit. Like it was just like that silent moment of like everyone was thinking the same exact thing of like, okay, this is bad, and then it just like instantly they barely had time to react. They just had time to be like, okay, this is bad, and then out he comes. Like I think that was so cool, and Brennan like having that up his sleeve the whole time was so amazing. It was just like, that's a clutch move. So I'm very excited but nervous to see what this is going to be like. The thing I am excited for though with the fight next episode is I want to see Mira in action, right? Because they were talking too about how like it was kind of sad that like we didn't get to see the Snow White fight, and how it's just like she's got it under control. She doesn't need them. but it would just be fun to see her like in battle, you know, because she's so dope. And then I also am excited to see what Mira's powers are going to be. I think they said she's divination, I want to say, because she was like collecting the bones and stuff like that, but I don't know if they've actually said what her class is yet. I just think she's so interesting, and I want to hear more about her story, about like, because she's not awakened. She is actually not aware of like what's going on in the world and stuff like that. She's kind of like our characters were when we first met them, so they're the ones kind of bringing her into this world. So I'm curious, like, what about her story, much like Rosamund before Rosamund knew about like the other worlds, what about her story made her want to run? I think that's really cool because she's supposed to turn to sea foam and die, and she did mention that like she couldn't kill the prince, so like that happened, and in the story she couldn't kill the prince and then she turns into sea foam and dies, but that hasn't happened. So now I'm like, is that because she hasn't gone in the water? Like if she goes to the water she'll turn to sea foam, or did she not turn to sea foam and she's like, wait, something's wrong and I don't want to go back to my family who were like, hey, here's a knife, kill that guy that you're in love with even though he doesn't love you, you need to kill him, and then you can come back or you're gonna die. Like I feel like I would be like, you know what, maybe not the family I want to hang out with. So I'm just curious. I hope that like even in the battle they can get a moment to talk to her and kind of figure out like what everything is. Again, it's going to be hard because as much as like I think the Mer King doesn't want to hurt her, they're also going to have to be very careful. Like they don't want any of them to die, but like we need the 7 princesses, so like we need Rosamund and Mira to be okay. So I think that's also going to be stressful, like worrying about Mira. Brennan's got her, I'm sure, you know, I'm sure she's stacked with stats that we don't even know about, so I'm excited to see that. But yeah, I think it's just going to be a really fun but stressful battle next time, and then I think if we can get past that successfully and not lose anyone, once we have all the princesses reunited, I think that's going to make for a very cool moment, and a lot is going to come out, and who even knows like what the world will be like when these 7 princesses are reunited, like if something will happen, and we'll get to see Gerard and Elodie reunited too, which is cool, and I'm just so pumped. I'm so pumped. Like I said last time, I feel like we're entering like the final third, you know, the phase 3 of this season, and it's definitely ramping up. So I am so excited to see what's going to happen. I loved this episode so much. Getting to meet 2 new princesses was not what I was expecting, and I was so happy, and getting to go to Toy Island, even if it was horrific, you know, I was just so happy. Everything I wanted to happen, and I'm just so happy. So yeah, if you have seen this episode, please feel free to leave your thoughts about it down in the comments. Also, make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and let me know what you thought of the episode and any theories you have about the big battle next episode. And yeah, thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!